The only thing I want from you is subscription and a like. So let's start the lesson. The last lesson. Let's first see the profile of the author. The author name is Alphonse Daudet, 1840 to 1897. Now the author was a French novelist and a short story writer. The last lesson is set in the days of Franco-Prussian War. Franco is France and Prussian War, which was in 1870 to 1871 for 1 year, in which France was defeated by Prussia, led by Bismarck. Prussia then consisted of what now are the nations of Germany, Poland, and parts of Austria. So there was a war between France and Prussia in 1870 to 71. France was defeated by Prussia, which was led by Bismarck. So Bismarck was leading Prussia. Now Prussia then consisted of what is now known as Germany, Poland, and parts of Austria. Now in this story, the French districts of Alsace and Lorraine have passed into Prussian hands. So let's read the story to find out what effect this had on the life at school. So because of this war, two French districts, Alsace and Lorraine, now they are into the hands of Prussia. And we will now read at what happened at the school. So what are the words which you need to look for in this chapter? In great dread of. Dread means once you are scared of something. Counted on, you are counting on something. Thumbed at the edges, stopped. In unison, in unity. A great bustle, relief. Reapproach ourselves with. So it's better to read these phrases in context of the paragraph. This will give you a better understanding. Even if you don't know a particular word, but once you read the entire sentence and the paragraph, you can get the understanding what exactly the phrase talks about. So let's start. I started for school very late that morning and was in great dread of scolding, especially because Mr. Hamill had said that he would question us on the participles, and I did not know the first word about them. Now, what do you mean by this? It's a very simple sentence. So the author is saying that he woke up quite late in the morning and he was dread of scolding. Dread means he was afraid that he will get scolding from his teacher, whose name is Mr. Hamill. And why he was scared? Because he knew that today Mr. Hamill will ask him a question on participles, and he had no idea about participles. Okay. For a moment, I thought of running away and spending the day out of the doors. It was so warm and bright. So the author is saying that for a moment he thought that he should not attend school, run away, and spend the entire day outside. Why? It was so warm and bright. The birds were chirping at the edge of the woods and in the open field back of the sawmill. The Prussian soldiers were drilling. So what he could see outside, that the birds were chirping. Now chirping is the sound which birds make. Normally you can sit in the evening in your balcony and you can hear the voice of the birds, the sound which they make. This is called chirping. So the birds were making sound, chirping at the edge of the woods, that is sitting on the trees, and in the open field back of the sawmill. So there was an open field which was a ground where the Prussian soldiers were drilling. Drilling means they were practicing whatever they would be. Now it was all much tempting than the rule for participles, but I had the strength to resist and hurried off to school. So it was very tempting that he should not go to school because he would be asked about participles, but he resisted. He had the strength to resist himself and he hurriedly got ready for school. So when I passed the town hall, there was a crowd in the front of bulletin board. Now what do you mean by that? There is a bulletin board and there are a lot of people standing in front of it. For the last 2 years, all our bad news had come from there. So all the announcements were made where? On the bulletin board. The lost battles, the draft, the orders of the commanding officer. And I thought to myself without stopping, what can be the matter now? So he was worried. What is there now on the bulletin board? Because every time he can see that on the bulletin board there was news of lost battles, orders of the commanding officer. So he was wondering what could now be there on the board. Okay. Then I hurried by as fast as I could go. Okay, just let me see if this is the same. Okay, what can be the matter now? Right. Now then, as I hurried by as fast as I could go, the blacksmith watcher who was there with his apprentice reading the bulletin called after me, "Don't go so fast, bub. You'll get to your school in plenty of time." So he was hurrying. He wanted to read it fast, and he was just going from there. So suddenly the blacksmith, the watcher, the name of the blacksmith is probably watcher, he just told his apprentice is a person who works with you as an assistant, reading the bulletin after me. So he was reading the bulletin after the author, and he said that, "Don't go so fast, bub. You will get to your school in plenty of time. So don't read so fast. Just read normally, because you have a lot of time to go to school." Well, I thought he was making fun of me and reached Miss M. Hamill's little garden all out of breath. So the author thought that that blacksmith is making fun of him, and suddenly, with a lot of efforts, he reached the school. So Miss M. Hamill's little garden. So he was all out of breath. He was hurrying up. He was running, and he was trying to reach at Miss M. Hamill's little garden. Usually when school began, there was a great bustle which could be heard out in the street. The opening and closing of desk, lesson repeated in unison, very loud, with our hands over our ears to understand better, and the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. So normally when the school begins, there's a lot of bustle. Bustle means a lot of noise, which could be heard on the streets as well. Children would open their desk, lessons repeated in unison means united. All the students are repeating their lessons together, so it's very loud and a lot of noise can be heard. And our hands over the years to understand better. Many a times there is so much of noise that you need to put hands on your ears to learn what you are reading, right? And don't get distracted. And teachers also, they are wrapping the ruler. Ruler means the scale which they have, and they're putting that on the table again and again so that students don't make noise. But now it was also still. I had counted on the commotion to get to my desk without being seen. But of course, that day everything had to be as quiet as Sunday morning. So the author is saying that he wanted to just reach his class without making any noise. He thought that commotion means a lot of noise, a lot of disturbance. He counted means he thought that he could reach his desk in the class without being seen in the commotion, in the movement, so that he will not be noticed. But that day everything was very quiet. Normally on a Sunday morning, how the place is, that day it was the same feeling. So there was no noise. Through the window, I saw my classmates already in their places, and M. Hamill walking up and down with his terrible iron ruler under his arm. So once the author reached his class, he saw his classmates already standing there, and M. Hamill, the teacher, he was walking up and down with his iron ruler in his arm. I had to open the door and go in bed, everybody. Okay. Oh yeah, I had to open the door and go in before everybody. You can imagine how blushed and how frightened I was. So since everyone was already at their place, the author had to open the door and he had to go inside the class in front of everybody. So he was very afraid. He was very scared of the teacher. But nothing happened. M. Hamill saw me and said very kindly, "Go to your place quickly, little Franz. We were beginning without you." Okay, so to his surprise, nothing happened, and M. Hamill just told him that go to your place, otherwise we would have started without you. I jumped over the bench and sat down at my desk. Not till then, when I had got a little over my fright, did I see that our teacher had on his beautiful green coat his frilled. So he was very excited. He just reached out to his bench and sat on his desk. He was frightened, scared, but he just saw his teacher very calm, and also he saw that teacher had on his beautiful green coat his frilled shirt and the little black silk cap all embroidered that he never wore except on inspection and prize days. So there was something special about that day. The teacher was wearing nice shirt with black silk cap and an embroidery was there. Normally the teacher used to wear this kind of clothes on inspection and prize days. So beside, the whole school seemed to strange and solemn. The whole school was very behaving in a very strange way and in a different manner. But the thing that surprised me most was to see on the back benches that they were empty, that they were always empty. The village people sitting quietly like ourselves, old Hauser with his three-cornered hat, the former mayor of the former postmaster, and several other besides. So normally the thing which surprised him is that he could see that on the back bench, which was always empty, today there were villagers who were sitting quietly. There was a person named Hauser with his three-cornered hat. He was the former mayor and the postmaster, and there were all other people as well. Something was happening, but he was not able to make out what has happened exactly. So everybody looked sad, and Hauser had brought an old primer, thumbed at the edges and held it open on his knees with his great spectacles lying across the pages. So he was wondering, everyone was sad. The Hauser, the old man, he brought an old primer which was put on the ground on the edges, and he had held it open on his knees. He opened it. Spectacles, the spectacles which he was wearing, that was lying across the page. While I was wondering about it all, Miss M. Hamill mounted his chair in the same grave and a gentle tone which he had used to me said, "My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin to teach only German in schools of Alice and Lorraine. The new master comes tomorrow. This is your last French lesson. I want you to be very attentive." This is why everyone was sad, because M. Hamill brought his chair at the same place, and in a very soft tone he said that, "Dear children, this is the last lesson which I am giving you, because an order has come from Berlin that only German will be taught in schools of Alice and Lorraine. I have already told you, Prussia had acquired and won these two districts, and they had passed an order that only German will be taught in these schools. The new master who will teach German will come from tomorrow, and this is the last French class, so they should be attentive." What a thunderclap these words were to me. Now these words, thunderclap, means shocking. He was not within his senses. He could not understand what happened. On the wretches, that was what they had put up at the town hall. So this order which they were reading, they were all sad. My last French lesson. Why? I hardly knew how to write. I should never learn any more. I must stop there then. He was surprised, shocked, and did not know how to react, because from tomorrow there will be no French classes and only German will be taught. He just had learned this language. Oh, how sorry I was for not learning my lessons, for seeking bird's egg or going sliding on the Saar. My books that had seemed such a nuisance a while ago, so heavy to carry. My grammar and my history of the saints were old friends now, that I couldn't give up. Now, the author was feeling very bad. Now, he realized that he had not learnt his lessons. Why? Because he wanted to get the bird's eggs. He didn't pay attention to his books. The books which were just nuisance for him now, they were feeling so heavy. Grammar and history of the saints were old friends now because he could not learn it anymore. And he didn't want to give it up. And M. Hamuel too, the idea that he was going away, that I should never see him again, made me forget about all his ruler and how cranky he was. M. Hamuel, whom he was afraid of to come to school, because he would ask him about the participles. Now he was thinking about him, that he would not be able to see him from tomorrow. He was very sad. He was wondering that I would never see him again. Poor man, it was in honor of this last lesson that he had put on his fine Sunday clothes. And now I understood why the old men of the village were sitting there in the back of the room. So everyone was sad. Poor man, because this was his last lesson. He had wore nice clothes. And now he could understand why all the people of the village were sitting there in back of the room. It was because they were sorry too that they had not gone to school more. It was their way of thanking our master for his 40 years of faithful service and of showing their respect for the country that was theirs no more. So everyone was sad because they didn't go to school to learn what the master was teaching since last 40 years. He gave his faithful service and showed their respect for the country. While I was thinking of all this, I heard my name called. It was my turn to recite. What would I not have given to be able to say that dreadful rule for the participle all through, very loud and clear and without one mistake. His name was called. He heard his name. He stood and started to recite. He was scared, but he spoke very loud and clear about the participle without making a mistake. But I got mixed up on the first words and stood there holding onto my desk, my heart beating and not daring to look up. Though he was scared, he didn't know how to react. He started to speak. He was standing and just speaking anything, whatever he gets in his mind, holding onto the desk, his heart beating and not daring to look up. I heard M. Hamuel say to me, "I won't scold you. Little Franz, you must feel bad enough." M. Hamuel said that, "Don't worry, I will not scold you. You must already be feeling bad. See how it is. Every day we have said to ourselves, bah, I have plenty of time. So this is now what teacher says, that every day we felt that we have a lot of time. I learn it tomorrow. This is what we said to ourselves. And now you see where you have come out. There is no time. Tomorrow you will not find me. You will not be learning what I wanted to teach you all these years." Ah, that's a great trouble with Alice. She puts off learning till tomorrow. Now those fellows out there will have the right to say to you, "How is it you pretend to be Frenchmen, and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language? But you're not worse, poor little Franz. We have all the great deal to reproach ourselves with." So the teacher is giving consolence. The teacher is trying to tell all the students that the trouble has come for the district and there will be no learning from tomorrow. And the people who will rule you, they will pretend to be Frenchmen. And you, since you have not learned anything, you will not be able to speak nor write your own language. But don't worry, you are not the worst, Franz. We have a great deal to reproach ourselves with. Your parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They preferred to put you work on farm or at the mill so as to have little or more money. And I have been to blame also. So now the teacher is saying that your parents were not responsible. They were not worried. Anxious means worried. They were not responsible enough to have you learn. They didn't want you to learn. They just preferred that you go and work on the farm and earn money. Even I have to be blamed. Have I not often sent you to water my flowers instead of learning your lessons? I also told you to go and water my flowers instead of learning your lessons. Even I am at fault. And when I wanted to go fishing, did I not just give you holiday? Even I wanted to go for fishing. I was selfish. I gave you a holiday but didn't teach you. Then from one thing to another, M. Hamil went on to talk of the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world. Now, M. Hamil was very emotional. He was speaking about the language, which is such a beautiful language. The clearest, the most logical, that we must guard it among us and never forget it. Even though we will not be learning this language from tomorrow, but we should never forget our language, because when a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. And even if you become slave to some person or some rulers, even if you hold to your language, you will always win because you will have the key. Then he opened a grammar and read us our lessons. Even on the last day, he read the lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. All he said seemed so easy and easy. I think too that I had never listened so carefully, and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. Today, since it was the last day, everyone was listening to him. Even he was speaking in a very clear and a nice manner. Everyone understood what he was trying to express. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away, and to put it all into our heads in at one stroke. So it was felt that the teacher wanted to teach everything that he wanted to in one day. He wished that could happen. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day, M. Hamil had new copies for us, written in a beautiful round hand, France, Alice, France, Alice. So after the grammar lesson, there was a writing lesson. That day, M. Hamil gave new copies to all the children to write. What was France expected to be prepared with for school that day? Participles. M. Hamil told them that you should prepare yourself for participle. What did France notice that was unusual about the school that day? Everyone was quiet. There was no noise. Everything seemed to be very awkward that day. What had been put on the bulletin board? That no more French would be taught, and German would be taught from the next day. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod of the top of a desk. Now, this beautiful copies which M. Hamil had brought for children, they were all over the school. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work and how quiet it was. Everyone was working and everyone was very quiet. The only sound was scratching of the pens over the paper. Everyone was writing that day. Once some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them. Even the insects were flying, but nothing could distract them. Not even the latest one, who worked right on tracing their fish hooks as if there was a French too. So there was no distraction. On the roof of the pigeons cooed very low, and thought to myself, will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? Now on the roof there were pigeons who were making their own noise, and he just wondered whether the pigeons will also be told to sing in German or speak in German. Whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw M. Hamil sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing and then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little school room. So while he was writing, he could see that M. Hamil was very sad, depressed, and he was looking at everything. He wanted to fix that thing. Fancy, for 40 years he had been there in the same place with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him, just like that. And today he's realizing, because tomorrow he will not be teaching. Only the desk and the benches had been worn smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller than the hope vine and that he had planted himself twined about the windows on the roof. There were a lot of plants which M. Hamul had planted. They were all there in the windows, on the roofs. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all, poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks for they must leave the country next day. He could understand how M. Hamul would be feeling because he would have to leave everything. His sister is already packing all the goods and they are ready to leave tomorrow. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in the history, and then the babies chanted Del Babi Babu Boo. So now, after the lesson, they had writing, and now it was time for babies. Down there at the back of the room, old Hauser had put on his spectacle and holding his primer in both the hands spelled the letters with them. Everyone was learning. You could see that he too was crying. His voice trembled. Tremble means he was very sad, depressed, and he was just crying without speaking clear words. He was very emotional. It was just funny to see him. That we all wanted to laugh and cry, but that was the last lesson. Even if we wanted, we couldn't. All at once the church clock struck 12, then the Angelus. At the same moment the trumpets of the Parisians returned from drill sounded under their window. M. Hamul stood up very pale in his chair. I never saw him so tall. Now the time was 12. The trumpets of the Parisians. The Parisians came. There was a lot of noise. Mr. Hamul stood up the last time. My friends, he said, but something choked him. He could not go on. Mr. M. Hamul wanted to say something, but he could not because he was very emotional. He was very sad. He then turned to his blackboard, took a piece of chalk and bearing on with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, Vive la France. He turned back and he wrote on the blackboard, Vive la France. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed, you may go. That was his last word. From next day, there will not be any French. German will be taught. How did Frank's feeling about M. Hamul in school change? Frank, who did not pay attention to the teachers, was even more sad. And he wanted to change things. He wanted, and he felt that he should have learned more and not wasted his time. Now let's understand the text. The people in the story suddenly realize how precious their language is to them. What shows you this? Why does it happen? Well, anything which we already have, we don't realize the importance. And once the thing goes, we suddenly realize that how important it was and we have missed so much. And that's what happened with them as well. Frank thinks, will they make them sing in German? Even the pigeons, what could this mean? Now, this is a situation when a person thinks that because we are now ruled by some person, we have to follow everything what he says. Will the same person or will the ruler also make animals, birds also follow what he wants? Well, that's not possible, but this is just a phrase to express that you can rule people, but you cannot rule nature. You cannot rule birds, trees, air. Talking about the text, when a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to the prison. This means that even if you enslave people, as long as people remember where they are from and what language, their inheritance, their culture, their country values, no matter what prison you put them in, they will be free. And they will become free one day. Can you think of example in history where a conquered people had their language taken away from them or had their language imposed on them? There have been many instances in the past. In fact, India was also ruled by Britishers. In over 200 years, We were enslaved. We were forced, and we had to follow everything what Britishers told us to do. What happens to the linguistic minority in a state? How do you think they can keep their language alive, for example? Well, linguistic minority should always be respected. They should be given their rights. They should be given their rights to practice their language. And if we talk about the linguistic minorities in our country, they are respected and appreciated in their own region and also across the country. And that's the beauty of our democracy. Is it possible to carry pride in one's language too far? Do you know what linguistic chauvinism means? Well, it is always a pride to carry their own language. And you should always be proud no matter what and which place you go. And this is something which every person should practice. English is a language that contains words from many other languages. This inclusiveness is one of the reasons it is now world language. For example, petite, kindergarten, capital, democracy, bazaar. So these are words which have their own meaning. Find out the origins of the following word: tycoon, tulip, logo, bandicoot, robot, veranda, barbecue, zero, sky, trek. You can do this exercise. You can write down in the description box below. Notice the underlined words in the sentences and take the option that best explains the meaning. What a thunderclap these words were to me. Now this means that these words were very, very impactful, startling and unexpected. He was shocked. He didn't know how to react. When a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to the prison. It is as if they have the key to the prison as long as they do not lose their language, are attached to their language. Okay, do not lose their language. Or are attached to the language. I think this is the better answer. Till the time you are attached to your language, there is no prison which can enslave you. Don't go so fast. You will get to your school in plenty of time. You will get to your school means don't worry. There's a lot of time. You will get to your school. It's already too late. I never saw him look so tall. This means that he had not, this is not correct, seemed very confident. Yes, this could be. Stood on the chair. I never saw him look so tall means that he stood very firm for the last time, because this was his last address and lesson to the class. Read the sentence. M. Hamul had said that he would question us on participles. In the sentence above, the verb form had said in the first part is used to indicate an earlier past. The whole story is narrated in the past. M. Hamul saying happened earlier than the events in the story. This form of verb is called past perfect. Pick out 5 sentences from the story with this form of verb and say why this form has been used. Well, you can do the exercise and you can find that 5 sentences and write down in the description box below. So write on a notice for your school bulletin board. Yes, you can write it down. Paragraph, 100 words. You can do that exercise. Have you ever changed your opinion about someone or something that you had earlier liked or disliked? Narrate what led you to change your mind. Okay, good exercise. You can do that. Find out about the following. You may go to the internet, interview people, consult reference book, and visit a library. Okay. The pain that is inflicted on the people of territory by its conquerors by taking away the right to study or speak their own language. Okay, this is an exercise which you can do in your class. So that's all about the lesson. I'm sure you must have liked it. And if you want me to make more such videos, you should comment down below. You should subscribe. And you should also like and share. So the more comments I get, the more videos and the more chapters I will teach. Thank you.